the last minute. So welcome everybody. This is module 7 in the Stregoneria 101 rebooted course. And tonight's topic, I think we were just saying before class started recording, is a really timely topic. It's a topic that I think with what's going on the world stage, what's going on in the United States, particularly is valuable. I apologize, I meant to blur out my background, so please ignore that disastrous mess behind you. I'm completely rearranging this room this week to try and squeeze a bed in here somehow. And time got away from me today, and I didn't realize that this disaster existed in the background. And I don't know how to I do know how to blur things on the fly. Blur my background. Yay. Oh, that looks horrible too. All right, so we'll just go back to letting you see the disaster. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into to the presentation, and this will be, as will all of our future presentations, this will be a short presentation followed by some discussion. And then if you're watching on the replay, we encourage you to continue the discussion in the comments below where it's posted. And I will probably have this posted within an hour or two after class tonight. So let me share screen. Okay. All right, so as I said, this topic tonight is protection of the Streghe space, loved ones, and self. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about our relationship to the universe, personal and mental protection, and familial protection, property protection, sort of extending that wall of protection to your community and those that matter to you. So we'll start off by just kind of mentioning something I think we all innately understand, is that our relationship to the cosmos kind of dictates and guides our way of looking at what needs to be protected or how we protect it by comparison to maybe some other traditions. And I think this is something that we could say in general exists in most folk magic traditions. It's what kind of distinguishes us from what I refer to as pop culture magical traditions. We're often raised to believe that we're separate and distinct from the world around us in society at large. And this dualistic notion of separateness allows for vulnerability. Separateness creates the construct of the other. And when you feel like there is an other out there, it's easy to see how people would feel like I have to ward this, I have to protect this, I have to do all these different things. But the reality is that out of chaos, out of the Big Bang, came regeneration. And as a chaos magic practitioner, this is fundamental both to my folk magic practice as a Afro-Sicilian practitioner and the Southern Italian tradition, as well as modern day chaos magic. Scientists theorize that our intelligence is becoming increasingly non-biological. In other words, that our intelligence is expanding beyond the human brain and kind of reaching into that realm of what we call the mind, trillions of times more powerful than it is today, is where they say in the next 20 to 25 years, intelligence will be. Well, what if each and every one of us were just one expression of a universal consciousness that's figuring itself out? When we talked in the advanced practice course, we talked about quantum theory, and we talked about quantum entanglement and how the implicate order says that this experience of life is like a hologram. And what we're doing is we are intelligence with a capital I figuring itself out. Well, if that's the case, then we have to ask ourselves, what does that mean in terms of needing to protect ourselves? And so most of you know by now, even the new people, that I am a geek, and proudly so. And so I want to share something with you that I think is really meaningful. It's very meaningful for me. It comes from this series, Babylon 5. in which a character named Delenn tells the captain of the ship, then I will tell you a great secret, Captain, perhaps the greatest of all time. The molecules of our body are the same molecules that make up the station and the nebula outside, that burn inside the stars themselves. We are star stuff. We are the universe made manifest, trying to figure itself out. As we both have learned, sometimes the 20 universe requires a change of perspective. And so that's from the episode A Distant Star. And it really had an impact on me because it is the sort of the foundation and put into words for the first time when I was a young guy in my probably 20s or 30s. In the first time I saw pop culture reflect what I was taught as a kid. That we are the same stuff as the stars, that the plants were indeed our ancestors. And so it let me know that the outside world was kind of catching up with the wisdom that the Afro-Sicilian tradition had always held as its central core. And I think that's one of the reasons why our approach to protection is a little bit different. And I hope, regardless of ethnic backgrounds or cultural backgrounds that we might have as different expressions in our community, that even if you don't come from the Afro-Sicilian tradition, that you'll kind of adapt this to your own culture. Look at your own the things in your own culture where you can find evidence of this being true, so that you can adopt it as your worldview. And so that's why this matters. If there's no separateness, then that means, as we said in the beginning of this course, then essential unity is the sort of founding principle. And we know scientifically energy can neither be created nor destroyed. So it will continue to exist. Energy changes form, it doesn't go away. And if we're all created from the same energy, whether you call it stardust or thought or God or goddess, then protection becomes more a matter of stabilizing form. And like if I had the ability, I know I do have the ability, I just don't know how to do it on here. If I ever get around to looking up how to highlight stuff on the screen, that last sentence is that key of this entire lesson. If we're all created from the same energy, then protection is more a matter of stabilizing form. So what we're going to talk about tonight is not focused on, oh, I have to protect myself from so-and-so, or from this thing that's happening, or from that thing that's happening. It's about protection as a matter of stabilizing my form, rooting myself in this moment, and knowing that nothing can negatively impact me and cause me to suffer, which is different from today when this is being filmed. There was a tragic mass shooting outside of Chicago in Highland Park, and 6 people lost their lives. 62 people were wounded as of this moment that we know of, and a bunch more people brought themselves to the hospital. So I think these numbers are going to dramatically and tragically increase. But so injuries take place, and we don't always have control over those physical acts against us, or emotional acts against us, or words spoken against us, but we always have the power to prevent suffering. Pain is a part of the natural experience of life. Suffering is absolutely optional. It's a choice that we make. And so when our work for protection is focused on trying to prevent suffering, then we have to really first take a look at what that really means. Who are we protecting ourselves from, or what are we protecting ourselves from? So in our tradition, 20th century notions of calling the quarters or casting circles or other religious superstitions were not part of our approach to protection. Instead, we rely on a more scientific understanding of vibrational frequencies, of color, of sound, of thought, of working in alliance with the natural world, what would be called animism, and plant magic, plant ancestors or alliances to stabilize the energies around us. And the reason we do that is because the plant world, the mineral world, the mycelial world has a lot more experience in terms of history and a lot more wisdom and intelligence in ways to work with energy to stabilize it, because the thing that we have that the mycelial network, that the mushrooms, that the plant world doesn't have is we have ego. And our ego is what causes us to think in terms of separateness. When there's an injury in the mycelial network to one tree, all of the trees in the area and all of the plants that support those trees that are part of that biosphere respond to the need of the one tree. If one person is injured in our world, there's these lines that are drawn in the sand. That's not my people. I can't be bothered there. Or I live somewhere else. I can't help them. The fact is that we're all one organism. We're one intelligence. We're one energy. And so when somebody is injured, excuse me, in Chicago, or somebody is injured on the battlefield in Ukraine or in Russia, that injury happens to each and every one of us. When somebody loses their life in Darfur, it affects me personally, because that's the energy I'm connected to that's experiencing violence. And when it's happening in my world, I can do my part, no matter how small that might feel in the moment, to stabilize the energy. And when I do that, I'm not just protecting me, I'm protecting us all. And in order to be effective, we have to remember that once an imbalance is permitted to destabilize our health, throwing us out of what we call homeostasis, then the work that we do has to include physical, spiritual, and energetic treatment. And what I mean by this is a lot of people, and this will become a little bit clearer when my new book comes out, because I talk about spiritual afflictions. And in our tradition and most folk magic traditions, we see injuries to our health, imbalances to our health, dis-ease, a lack of ease, as being a manifestation rather than the thing itself. So if you develop, for example, neck pain, we see that neck pain as being evidence that you're carrying spiritual burdens. You're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. And so that creates an energetic imbalance. That energetic imbalance destabilizes our health and begins to manifest in ways that can continue to get worse and worse. There's an ancient story that says that Rabbi Jesus told his followers, if you go to a place and they're not hospitable, they don't welcome you, then I want you to leave that place and brush every speck of sand from your sandals before you leave. Now, the reason he did that, they were going to be walking in the desert. People say, well, I don't know how that made any sense, because shit's going to get back on their feet again. But the energy of that inhospitable place could cause abrasion. And one speck of sand could cause a blister. And as they continue to walk with the energy of that one speck of inharmonious sand, of negative energy from those people, that blister could become infected. It could then claim the person's foot or their leg or their life. And so the message, the real teaching there was we have to, when something destabilizes our health or our minds that then leads to our health, we have to start from the physical and work our way back. So I don't want anyone to say when they read my book or they watch any of the other course, oh, what John Michael's saying that the reason he survived AIDS, full-blown AIDS for 39 years almost now, is because he did the metaphysical work. I do the physical, the medical work too. I intervened physically in my body, but the reason that the disease has progressed as slowly as it has, and it's still progressing, is that I do the work on my physical body, but then I also dig deeper and do the spiritual work and then the energetic work. And it's become almost 40 years of of intensive spiritual practice on that one thing itself. So if physical illness is manifesting in your life, see a doctor, see a healthcare practitioner. At a time like this, when we're experiencing a crisis of women's healthcare and bodily autonomy being taken away from them, a fundamental human right being stripped away from them, which we're really clear doesn't mean that abortions have ended in the United States. Abortions will continue to happen. They just won't happen safely. They won't happen with a medical provider ensuring the safety of that woman or that person with a womb, since not everybody who gets pregnant is a woman. That womb bearer will not be center focus by a medical professional. And so the way that we treat this manifestation in the world is, yes, doing energetic work, magical workings, spiritual workings, as we're doing. But that prompted me this week to say, you know what, I have a church, a recognized church in the United States. And so as the presiding minister of that church, I have the authority to say every woman who has a challenge with the state, wherever they happen to live, that says, no, you cannot have an abortion, is protected by the very same laws that say that a Jehovah's Witness doesn't have to have a blood transfusion. She's protected by the very same laws that say that a religious scientist doesn't have to go to a hospital, they can go to a sanatorium in order to get well. It's called the freedom of, the freedom clause in the Constitution, and so free expression clause, and so I recognize that for that very reason, by enshrining a woman's or womb holder's bodily autonomy within the context of a sacramental ritual, that we can protect that woman's right. And so we're now positioned to challenge, and hopefully by the end of this month, we're only about $200 away from the $800 that we need to be able to get a 501c3, and we will take this to the courts and challenge the right that every pregnant person in this country, and then we'll expand beyond that, who needs a safe haven to be able to have an abortion, can come to a retreat center. And if that retreat center has to be on my couch, it'll be on my couch, where they'll be able to receive the sacrament of sanctifying their womb, bodily autonomy, and having their abortion, with medical supervision, with an actual licensed doctor in the area, or nurse practitioner, or other medical professional. And so that's what it looks like to respond. We know that if we just did the magic would be effective. The people responsible for this, the Clarence Thomases and Alito and Amy Coney Barrett and the beer guy Kavanaugh, they will energetically pay the price and be balanced, and what they've wrought will come to them. But that's not going to do anything in this moment for the women in this moment who were planning on having abortion tomorrow, who can't access an abortion. So we have to do the physical work. And so that's the first thing in protecting ourselves. So remember, if an energetic imbalance or thought or idea manifests in the body as illness, we treat the cause, which is the thought, and then we treat the condition. But if the energetic imbalance has already manifested as trauma or mental health issues, we treat the cause and the condition simultaneously. Whether that's a physical trauma or mental trauma, we don't have the pleasure or the privilege of being able to wait and let's just do the metaphysical stuff. That becomes spiritual bypassing. And that happens far too often and gets used as an excuse for, well, I'm going to do my sigils and I'm going to light my candles, but I'm not going to speak out on social media or at my local city council office about the injustice to this group or that group. I'm just going to do my little private part. And so we do this through science, we do this physically and mental and metaphysically, and we do this. Part of protection then is nonviolent activism. So there's an intersectionality to protection from our perspective. And it's important to understand, and I think that I couldn't think of a group of people except for maybe people who were of British background or people who were from early Roman background. I can't think of another culture that hasn't experienced extreme colonization and oppression by the empires. And this, make no mistake about it, in my opinion, what we're seeing play out on the global stage right now is the fall of the last empire. 7 empires have fallen in the 20th century. There's one left to fall, and that's this one. But the intersectionality that that we're called to as metaphysical and esoteric practitioners is protecting the mind, the body, and spirit as one organism, rather than trying to separate them out. So we treat causes and conditions with herbs, that's the medicine, with spellcraft, with light and sound and action. And when you look at this in the big picture, when you can take a step back, all of this amounts to manipulating energy around a certain cause and condition to restore balance. If you think back to class number 1, I said that's all that we do in our magical practice. That's all that anyone in any magical practice or any tradition really does. Some traditions require more stuff to do it, and that stuff isn't what's doing the magic, they are. The stuff is really just to bookmark or anchor in the energy of that moment, or to help a person increase the belief in themselves in that moment. But the effectiveness comes when we stop thinking of, okay, so is this a body issue I have to work on? Is this a mind issue? Is this a spiritual issue? They're all one. It's all one organism. And we need to bring balance. And the only way you bring balance is by saying, I'm going to do that for the whole. So when it comes to the second part, that's sort of the wide view. Now, protecting our loved ones, our property, and our communities, the Streghe have always been social justice warriors. The reason that that this tradition arises on the island of Sicily is because so many cultures who were oppressed by the Roman Empire lived in Sicily. And that's why, unlike some places where a conqueror comes in, and maybe that conqueror was, you know, the Ottoman Empire, maybe that conqueror at another time were the Normans, maybe it was another country, maybe it was the rampage that came in through Carthage. All of those who came to Sicily found, because of our metaphysics, I'm convinced of that, because of our esoteric base, they found that the people didn't resist whoever was coming in, whatever the dominant culture would be. Instead, we absorbed it. We said, oh, great, you're bringing us something new to learn, something new to see, a different perspective. And so it became this, and remains to this day, this thriving culture that understood compassion, plurality, diversity. And so we became social justice warriors. The reason the mafia started was in direct response to the oppression of the Roman Catholic Church, who were doing corrupt things and stealing from the poor. And the mafia were originally, they got out of hand, obviously, but they were originally like the Robin Hoods of Sicilia. And we lived on the hedges of society, the magical practitioners, because we've always been society's protectors. We've always been the ones that were sort of the guardians of that community, the advocates, the healers. And our view of society has always been animistic. And so it includes all of the manifest universe, where if you were living in town, it would be easier to get caught up in popular culture of whatever era you're in, where, which might have been the Great Enlightenment, might have been the Dark Ages, might have been different periods of persecution and superstition. If you lived on the hedges, you kept some distance between you and pop culture, you were able to see the wide view, the bigger view. And so your protection then, it was easier to remember when you were living in among the hedges, that there was no distinction between us and quote unquote them. And so the protection work was more powerful. And we were the servants. We were the people who, who gave birth. We were the midwives, the birth doulas, the death doulas, the healers, at a time before medicine was being widely recognized. And so we understood that chaotic data results in chaotic experiences. And this is to use more modern phrases that come from that are actually part of a couple of my books. It's of fundamental importance that the practitioner understands each one of us is 100% responsible for our experience of this life. We're not responsible for all the things that happen. That's other people's choices, other people's decisions, but we're responsible for how we experience that. It's not about placing blame. It's about reclaiming our power. Intersectionality with the Huna tradition of Ho'oponopono, the sacred code of forgiveness, is what I draw on a lot to kind of explain or codify this approach that says I'm not, I may not have had any control over what happened to me, but I have control over what I do about what happened to me. And that's where the magic of protection comes in. So the first thing that we do in protection always, and we started talking about this in our open discussion last week, is self-care. That means cleansing ritual baths. That means, cleansing with aromatherapy. Ellen and I were talking about that before class tonight. Finding the patterns in our tradition, it's the numbers 3, 6, and 9. Looking for those patterns in life. In pop culture, there's all kinds of other stuff, 11:11 and all that stuff. Seeking emotional and professional therapy to work on the emotional part, the scientific part of this, reconnecting with the natural world, and being aware on the picture there, there are lots of things that might suggest that there's an energetic imbalance that stems from not taking care of yourself. So just the idea of self-care itself, if you're letting it slide, could result in headaches, fatigue, painful jaws or teeth, sensory overload, tensed shoulders, cramps, heart palpitations, an upset stomach, night and day sweats, bitten fingernails, sore fingers, restless leg syndrome. All of these things tell us that we're not doing enough for self-care. And so the self-care, like I said, can start as simply as taking a ritual cleansing bath, doing a cleansing ritual of some other sort, a centering ritual, but also might require, if we've allowed it to get to the place where it's physically manifesting, if you're getting restless leg syndrome, you need to take something that's rich in magnesium. Eat some broccoli or some bitter greens. Make yourself a pot of collards or mustard greens or something to put that magnesium back in your body. And if you're not a cook, go to the store and buy some magnesium. Now then we move from the physical, the self-care, to energetically protecting ourselves. And so that's in our tradition, that's a reliance on the colors of red and black. It's no surprise that 90% of the time that you see me wearing red and black. 80 to 90% of the time when you see me, my head is covered. And at times when you think you see me when my head isn't covered, remember I was a hairdresser. Sometimes my head is covered and it doesn't look like my head is covered because it's not my hair. So we do these things to protect ourselves, and the colors red and black are very important. Hollow out the bottom of a red or black candle and stuff it with rue, with bay leaf, violets, and lilac, and then seal the ingredients back in with another red or black candle. Or another little trick I like to use is buy dollar store crayons. And after I've hollowed out a candle I'm going to use for working, just melt that crayon in there, and you don't have to worry about having a wick to deal with. And seal it in, let it cool, and then charge and burn the candle after dressing the top with a drop or two of Streghe oil, rubbing your finger around the wick clockwise 9 times. Now, protecting our loved ones, this is the next step. We've protected ourselves, protected our environments. So that includes our loved ones. But if you specifically want to protect them in our tradition, Streghe oil can be rubbed on the soles of the feet, or if you have loved ones who aren't on board, put a couple drops of Streghe oil inside their socks or their shoes. So you're still doing the protection work and they're not having to feel like you're doing any woo-woo stuff with them. A red ribbon can be pinned on a child's clothing or put on the bassinet of a newborn. And then, of course, the Italian cornu is the horn is protection for people and pets or property. You can hang that up somewhere, anywhere in your house. It could be hung in the window of the house. It represents, depending on who you ask, either a pepper or a drop of blood. But they call it the horn just because when one of the others, what we call insegnatura in the hand gestures, the other protection we do is this protection, which looks like horns. So that's considered to be a horn. But it originally, I would be willing to bet, stems from our reliance on cayenne peppers as a protective mechanism, a plant protector. Now, as culture continued to grow, one of the other things we started to see in our tradition was the use of what's called a chimaruta. And the chimaruta is a sprig of rue. Originally, it was a literal sprig of rue, like a branch of rue, on which different charms would have been hung, including plants, including rough-hewn charms, maybe paper-crafted charms, but that later became a piece of jewelry. And depending on where you are culturally in southern Italy and Sicilia, you'll find that the images that are on the chimaruta vary from like village to village, not just like from Sicily to say Napoli, in the individual villages, and then quite often, if something specific happened to a particular family, their chimaruta might be completely different from everybody else, even in the village. So these symbols that appear on there, you could use the chimaruta, like I said, the cornu, the red ribbons, sprigs of rue. When we were in the olden days of actually using a real sprig of rue, you used to dip it in moving water, and then take that sprig of rue and asperge or like kind of sprinkle the house and the people that are in it. So protecting our communities, if you're protecting your family, then the next step is your family doesn't live in a vacuum. The picture on the screen in front of you is something that I was fortunate to be part of after the George Floyd murder. And we went to the Capitol, that's the Harrisburg Capitol, and we lit candles for all of those who were assaulted in that particular year from police violence. So there was one tea light placed on the stairs for every one of those people. And remember, George Floyd was killed on, I think it was May 25th. So by May, what you see on the screen in front of you is the number of murders that took place from police violence. There's no way to extricate our magical practice from social justice advocacy, and there's no way to protect the people you love unless they never leave their house without protecting your community. And so our ancestors understood this and understand this still, and they understood that Stregoneria is not a self-serving path. That it's not just something that we pull out, oh, I'm going to do some magic now because I'm short money this week. It's literally a way of life. It's the way that we move through life, as I talked about a couple of weeks ago. And so I challenge you to, as we wrap up tonight's presentation, think about how you could be of greater service to your community, your local, regional, or global community. What things can you do to ensure healing that not only takes place for your for the global community and then for your family, but also takes place for you, remembering that if we heal that thing that we see, like in terms of violence that manifests today, what are the things in me that I can let go of and heal when I've been violent in the past, so that I never have to experience violence again, as a reminder that I have to heal that shit from my past. So we heal it and we let it go, and it genuinely changes and transforms the world. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's not going to be, okay, so I worked on my own violence. How come I still see violence in the world? We still have more work to do. We have daily work to do, but we'll get there. And I truly believe that. So the exercise for this week, as I said, would be an easy, a lighter one. I don't know that easy is a good word. It's a lighter one. It definitely will take some work. I'd like to encourage everybody to journal. In what ways do you feel protected? Do you not feel protected right now in this moment? And what can you do to take steps to shift that? So whether it's doing candle work, whether it's sitting and forgiving someone or something or yourself, whether it's doing a session of sitting with the ancestors and talking about how you don't feel supported or protected right now, and sitting with that and allowing that to sort of move you and inspire you, listen to what they have to say. And then think about, in what ways do you feel those you care about are vulnerable? What do you worry about for your kids, your spouse, your friends, the people that you love and care about? How do you, what vulnerabilities for them are occupying space in your mind? And in what ways do you feel that your environment is vulnerable and your world is vulnerable and unprotected? And then sit with those things and ask yourself what you can do, what steps you could do right now. It might be as simple as that candle ritual that I shared. And this will be up in a PDF form so that you can pull that up if you want to remember what you put inside that hollowed out red candle. And I'm going to be doing in the fall a lot more videos on my YouTube channel that show you other ways to do this, how you could do something as simple as taking a Dollar Tree candle and put it in, like I'll put this in a pot of boiling water, boil this down. This is 80 hours worth of burn time. So maybe I only want to do a working for a week rather than waste an entire candle. I'll melt it down and I'll take half. Now, when you melt it down, just so you know, there's only that much wax in the jar. So I'll take half of that wax and I'll pour it into a jar. And if I do it in that jar, I could, start pouring and then put my rue, my bay leaves, whatever else, my lilac in the jar, and then pour the rest of that half of the candle in there. And now I have a 40-hour magically charged candle that I created myself to do that working. And it cost me, it'll literally cost you 50, 60 cents. So I'm going to do more videos like that. That's going to be part of the spell crafting course that we do in the fall, where I'll talk more about it in classes, but I'll do some public videos to just help people start making some changes in their lives. So this week, end your ritual, end your journaling by doing some sort of self-protection ritual or cleansing and centering ritual, and repeat the ancestral ritual that we did a couple weeks ago, and ask for guidance from your ancestors. Ask for support and inspiration. And if you don't feel that you're hearing it in the moment, don't get bogged down by thinking you're doing something wrong. And that's why you're not hearing anything. Relax, get on with your day. Thank them. Be sure to leave an offering, thank them, and go on with your day. The answer will come in the day, or the answer will come when you go to sleep. It might be a dream that you have. It might be something that you see. It might be that you hear something on the radio or on television, and it makes you think of the answer you were looking for. Don't ever discount the fact that the ancestors will use anything and everything, whatever it takes, to get through to us in this moment. They have a little bit clearer picture of seeing all the shit we're going through and all the baggage we're bringing to the table. And so if we're not able to quiet ourselves enough to let spirit come through and hear them, they'll find a way to get that message through to you. Just trust them and trust the process. Like I say, be married to the process and divorced from the outcome, and the outcome will always take care of itself. The message will always get through to you. So that's, like I said, that seems like a simple exercise, a simple assignment. And it is simple, but it's not easy. Be prepared to get a little uncomfortable. And if you're not getting a little bit uncomfortable, you're probably not digging deep enough. Dig until some of that stuff starts to come to the surface. Don't dig to the point to where you traumatize yourself, but dig to where you start to get a little bit uncomfortable. Because especially when we think about, what are the vulnerabilities of our loved ones that we worry about, we need to address those things, because those things will reveal for us what our beliefs are. And in order to be able to effectively work magic to balance, we'll call it an injustice. Maybe you have a child whose boss is abusive. That means that you have a belief that that boss has some sort of power over your child because they can fire them. And if you want to bring about an effective change, you have to be able to identify the thing to change the energy around it. You can't just say, I'm going to change the energy around, just that a general, I'm going to change the energy around my boss and my child. Maybe you know that the boss is a racist, or is, doesn't like Irish people, doesn't like Jewish people, doesn't like, has some sort of prejudice. So you need to do a specific working to release any times in your past when you've been racist or an ethnic oppressor. Anytime you've looked at a person as an other rather than as part of the one, and forgive yourself for it, and then do your working. That's why we do the cleansing bath. Cleansing baths are great times to forgive yourself. You got to be in that shower doing the thing, and then any of the things. And I just say, whatever it is in this moment that I've not forgiven, let me become aware of it so that I can let it go. And sometimes the cleansing bath is like better than anything else you do the rest of the day, because it becomes like sacrament. And then go on to your working. And in your working, now you've identified the thing that you want to change. And so you can protect that loved one from that thing. So get a little uncomfortable. And now I'll open it up to Chanel and Ellen if you have any questions or any comments, anything you want to share along the topic. And then anybody who's watching on the replay, you can comment under the video and let us know your thoughts as well. Anything?
Yeah. Lady Justice has been showing up all week for me. And it can get a little hairy when that happens. And I have to be careful of how I say things so that it doesn't disrupt everybody else. It doesn't affect me like it affects everybody else. So yeah, and then chaos can really come in after that. And I spent a lot of time this weekend in retrospect, and I shed a lot of tears this weekend over it, because I didn't know if I wasn't protecting myself enough, if I wasn't protecting my family, I know I have to get my roost sprigs and go down to the water and go around into the house and make the protection candles. That was on my mind too, coming up before the class. So and I have pictures of how I did it the last time, if that's okay to share.
Sure, absolutely.
I made them from scratch, so with beeswax and stuff. I was a little kind of not sure about them when I first did it, right? So, but they worked really well, and it's time to make a fresh batch. So, yeah.
Right on. That's awesome. And see, that's what our ancestors would have done. They wouldn't have gone to the dollar store.
Yeah.
They would have made them themselves. And that's why when we look and say, well, why was it that, grandma was always more effective at her magic? She got results so much faster than me. Well, it's because she didn't have a dollar store to go and buy a dollar candle. So my suggestion is buy the dollar candle, melt it down. Now you don't have to worry about the reason I do it is real simple. If I'm making a candle that's white, or balms or anything like that, where I'm working with regular beeswax. I just work with, I have a box of beeswax right there, right. Actually, that's part of the mess over there. So I use the beeswax. But if I need to make a colored candle with Parkinson's, it can be a little tricky squeezing the little bottle of food dye into the candle and not getting it all over everything else, and then trying to scrape it out of the pot. If I use this, it's self-contained. It doesn't go into the wax pot. So the wax pot stays neutral colored. I can melt this down and it's already red. And then if I need to do a 2-color candle, which I do for a lot of my workings, I can have the red candle and the green candle, or the red candle and the black candle, in the pot, and then pour equal parts of them back into the other container. And you can either reuse these jars themselves for your candle, or at dollar store they have lots of mugs, and so I know, for example, there's a certain mug that if I use that mug, so it's heat proof because it's a mug, and I know that if it's that particular size, it's going to last 7 days. So kudos to you on making the candles. Definitely do that yourself. And just maybe when Lady Liberty shows up, or Lady Justice shows up, just ask that she be swift with her sword, and that you have the wisdom to know what you need to do to clean up the mess. Because if she's swift with her sword, it cauterizes. So she'll cut off the part that's diseased, and there won't be infection because it can be cauterized. A lot of times our own energy, I think, gets in the way of justice being meted out. And we allow our anger in the way. We allow our desire for revenge in the way. I know I'm really struggling with that with the aforementioned Supreme Court justices. I have to make sure tonight, before I do the working, that I have no need for revenge, that I simply want justice. The rest of it will take care of itself. That's none of my business how it manifests. And so it could be our energy. And so the easiest way to do that, cleanse, when you see her, immediately do something, have a cleansing spray, do a little bit of cleansing, and just say, let your justice be swift, and give me the wisdom to do what I need to do to care for those left in its wake. And you will. You absolutely, you're a mama bear. You absolutely.
It hurts sometimes, but
it does.
I mean, it has to be done. It's just, otherwise it gets out of control, and it's not. It causes more pain in the body.
It'll cause a deeper hurt not to bear it and let it and pretend it's not happening than it does to bear the short-lived pain of knowing that somebody's got to get really uncomfortable when they get a kick in the ass.
Yeah.
To know that they're getting a kick in the ass.
Yeah. And that's one of the hardest things for me to do. It's a mom thing. You don't want to hurt your kids. You don't want to hurt your spouse. You don't want to hurt your family, but you got to use your voice. Yeah.
That's why we have mothers who are benevolent mothers, and we have mothers who are not as benevolent. And the deeper you look at the ones that you think were benevolent, the more you see that there were times they were quite wrathful. And the more you look at the ones that you thought were not benevolent, the more you find that there were times that they were just overflowing with compassion and love. So it dispels that distinction in your mind, that Hecate is the bad one and Stella Maris is the good one, or Yamaya is the good one, because I got news for you. Rivers and oceans can become as wrathful as they can become peaceful. And so when we know that we can just turn to whatever the mother is in us that resonates with us, and know that sometimes mama's got to be, she's got to grab that switch. Sometimes she's got to grab the healing salve. Mm-hmm. And you do, and whether you believe it or not, I've seen you do that for years now. Absolutely.
Can I ask another, sorry, can I ask
Sure.
another question about doing the protection, like a property protection and stuff? Is it, does it matter whether it's nighttime or daytime when you do that? Like,
Ask yourself before you
yeah.
do that, because it can matter, because it can matter with what you're dealing with, what the particular energy is that you're dealing with. But
Hmm.
I can't tell you there's a better time to do something without knowing all the particulars of
Yeah.
that, and I'll still
Nosy
not know
neighbors.
as well as you will.
Yeah.
You'll know, like I know if it was nosy neighbors, I know when I would do it, but I also know when I do 90% of my work. So, I'm a night owl. I
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
things under the light of the moon. I'm not
It doesn't
super
bother me to
connected
do
to the
it.
light of the sun.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And it also depends on the kind of working. Like some of the workings that I do also require that you do things a little more quietly, a
Hmm.
little more. And I like the quiet of the night. I don't get disturbed at night. The phone doesn't ring at night. Um, but also if I have
Hmm.
to dig a hole outside, for candles and stuff, just because say, no, that's where the bodies are buried. If I have to like plant something at night, I do that. And my plant allies are almost all plants that are nightshades. So nighttime is just the natural time for me. Other people their plant allies might be, morning glories and roses and things that open up in the light of the sun. Go with what go
Okay.
with what your
Okay.
heart tells you.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
If birds are your spirit animal, because you're an air,
They're out in the
if
daytime.
birds are your spirit animal, you're going to find less birds flying around at night, unless you're
Hmm.
working with owls. Um, so go with your gut on that.
We have bats.
They aren't birds.
I know.
I love bats. We have bats on our porches.
Mm.
Chanel, you were going to say something.
Yes, I had a couple. The first thing I wanted to say was I really enjoyed this lesson.
Thank you.
The beginning with the plants are our ancestors. I've recently been working more with plants, but it has always been a little bit more of a struggle. I do better with things that I understand more easily. And plants, I've always felt like I have to get into the science, or it's hard for me to connect, which brings me to the next part of a lot of what you were talking about, the scientific explanation for magical things. And I love it, because I like for things to make sense in that way. But I feel myself being frustrated when I don't understand, but I feel excited about working harder to understand. Um, what I had a question about, I have two questions. The first one is probably simple for you. When you were talking about the cornu, and it's red, and I've seen it red a lot, but most of the time in my life, I always saw it as gold, probably because it's jewelry. And that's actually my question. Is it just because it's jewelry? I've never seen it
Yeah,
as silver.
it's just
People
because
have
it's
not.
gold, because I will show you. You can't really see it because I wear a black shirt. Mine's black. Um,
Mm,
again, for the same reason that I just explained why I do most of my workings at night. It's and that's why I'm absolutely convinced that it was originally to represent a drop of blood, because of some of the rituals that I learned early on, that uh, surround blood magic type of things. So it's meant to be that ultimate protection. The ultimate protection we have is the blood of the ancestors that courses through
hmm
our veins. And so there's a very specific reason, linking to my ancestors, linking to the journey that I understand. This past weekend, I just found out that on my grandmother's side, my paternal grandmother, so the Italian side, um, that my grandmother's father, who died in 1926, was actually a British citizen. So I learn new things, which meant, as we dug further, he was indentured in Great Britain. This was the side of the family that were Italian and Romany. So he was a servant in someone's house before he met my great-grandmother, not a grandfather, not my grandfather. So there's a very specific reason why I choose a black drop of blood because of a reminder of a part of the struggle and the ancestors on whose shoulders my ancestors stand on. So yeah, that could be anything. Now the color red in our tradition is the color of protection. Black is the color that just deflects back at anything that's being thrown at you, and can is the result of absorbing all the colors of the prism. But I would also say, regarding your first half of that first question, or your first comment, let yourself be kind of invigorated by and enticed by the science, but don't get too hung up on it, because that just becomes an endless wormhole that I can very easily find myself, spending 6 or 8 hours reading books on quantum mechanics, and it's all theory at this point. And it doesn't matter if it takes us away from doing the actual work. Our intuition's still better. The science is it's just amazing. Like, to me, it excites me that science is catching up with what our ancestors were persecuted for.
Right.
What some of them were they were put to death for doing things that we now know are real.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Yes, and also the other thing about this specific lesson is I haven't talked at all, I don't think, about my connection to this tradition, which I won't do right now. But a lot of things in this lesson made other things that I understand make sense, which maybe for another time. But my other question has something to do with because I don't want to take up a lot of time right now. And I also need to think, because I go on tangents and ramble. I always worry about taking up a little bit too much time or space. So the other thing is, there's the part that said about this tradition sharing a same understanding or truth to the Huna tradition, the Ho'oponopono, I think it said, but the sacred code of forgiveness. Maybe because we're talking about protection today, you don't want to spend a lot of time on that. But I was curious about it. I circled the word code because I'm very good at forgiveness. If I love you and if I believe you, when you apologize. But I also struggle with forgiveness in a lot of the ways in spiritual communities we talk about it, right? You cannot move on unless you've forgiven someone. Oh, I can move the fuck on easily and not fucking forgive you. But I don't think that that's what you were talking about. That's why I circled the word code. And so I was just a little bit curious about what that means.
So two things. One, I apologize if I made it sound like the connection between Ho'oponopono was with the tradition. That's a connection to me personally.
Okay.
So it's the sort of the modern framework. I met a man whose name is Ihaliakala. He's got like an Americanized name, and I don't remember what it is. But his name's Ihaliakala, and he is a doctor, a psychiatrist in Hawaii, who took over a mental institution, and they were very violent offenders there. And they'd gone through multiple directors who just could not handle. These people were like the worst of the worst, very violent criminals. And through using what's known as Ho'oponopono, the Hawaiian Code of Forgiveness, that's a principle, a bedrock principle of the Huna tradition. He, rather than in short, I'll send you, first of all, I will send you on Facebook a copy of my book, if you'd like, on that tradition. It's one of the books I wrote under my monastic name. It's called Shunyata. So I'll send you a digital copy of that, and I think you'll vibe with it, because you're absolutely right. First of all, forgiveness has nothing to do with the other person ever. It's only something we do for ourselves. It's the letting go, and sometimes the best way to let go is say, "F you, I'm out of here," and that's forgiveness. That in and of itself is a forgiveness. But the approach that they use is, he uses a fivefold or a fourfold mantra. In the book, I use a fivefold mantra that takes us through a process of basically unlocking vibrational frequencies in ourselves that completely sever the ties, so that whatever the experience was that we need to forgive to be able to move on ourselves. And that doesn't mean like the religious sense, like you have to forgive him or else you're going to get stuck. It means you have to forgive him because you don't want to deal with that shit again. You need to change a vibrational frequency so that there's no longer, almost like changing the locks on a door so that the key no longer fits. So you change the tumbler inside the door, that key, they could stick it in all day long. It's never going to get all the way in there, and it's not going to open the door. And so this code of forgiveness is a vibrational frequency tool that you use by repeating these 5 phrases that have nothing to do with the other person, that changes the locks in the tumbler. I have to remember that because I've never used that analogy, and that really is a great analogy. So thank you for that. But that's kind of what it is and what it does. And so for me, it gave me vocabulary for something my aunts and my grandmother would tell us that we do, and it's the reason that our people survived through so many millennia, all the different oppressions, all of the different conquerors coming in, and I realized that what she was saying was forgiveness, but it didn't fit the religious ethos that I was told forgiveness meant. So I was like, well, I can't call it forgiveness. I don't know what it is, though. It's some kind of magic. And now I have a vocabulary. So I stole that vocabulary entirely from the Huna tradition.
Yes, that makes sense. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. As soon as we're done, I'll send you a copy of that book. I think, Ellen, you read it too, didn't you? Didn't you read Shinata?
Yes. That tradition helped me immensely in the beginning of my journey. I still
That's
use
actually
it.
how we met.
I use it daily.
That's how we met, because we met through my series, A Year of Thinking Magically, which is based on the book.
Yeah.
Right on. All right. Well, thank you both for being here and for everybody for tuning in. Like I said, I'll get this up on the web in the next hour. And our next class, we'll just watch the announcements in the platform for the next class. Our next class next Monday will be the advanced practice course, and then the following Monday we'll be back here with module 8. And I love and appreciate all of you, and we'll see you soon.